Did her.
Yay!
I liked that opening. That was awesome.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Learning Bigfoot. Happy Sunday. We made it through another week. Hallelujah. It's been a really interesting week. Oh my gosh. Hi, Gary Spikes Sr. Misty, hi, how are you? Oops, Nicole, there we go. And author Marianne, guest wiki. We are so on. Oh, and Mike's Adventures.
I know it's on the show you're on, Mike. And
Double.
Gary. I know
we are honored. Yeah, we're honored to have Jason on here from SIRU Papers, and you guys probably have seen him over on Hidden Existence. He's over there quite a bit. Love seeing him over there, as well as Bigfoot Odyssey, I believe, right? Or is it the researchers?
Odyssey. Well, so okay, I get around. I'm most Sundays I'm on Daniela's show Hidden Existence, and I have done Bigfoot Odyssey a couple times. But I'm always on Texas Front Porch whenever I can. I'm the official co-host of Texas Front Porch, and of course I got my stuff over at SIRU Papers, which is you go to SIRUpapers.com. It's got links to everything, the YouTube channel, my books, the whole 9 yards.
And it's awesome. You need to check out that website because it's awesome. Links are below, by the way. But check it out after the show. Don't check it out now. Check it out after.
Yeah, later. Once I'm gone, then you check it out.
Yes. Hi,
well,
Connor.
off the show, not gone. So
right. Yes. Once the show has come to an end, then you make Gallivant and subscribe to everything and share it with everyone you know, whether you like them or not. Same thing with this show. Make certain everyone knows this is the place to be.
This is a place to be because we got you on it tonight, and I'm so stoked because you have a lot of knowledge on this subject, and I cannot wait to hear. I mean, because I already know that this show could turn into like a 3-parter. I'm so excited because there's so much knowledge right at our fingertips right now. So hope you guys brought your snacks and a friend and your questions because it's going to get real.
And just make sure you save your questions closer to the end of the show because I know there's a lot of questions that we're already going to have for Jason. But when we get closer to the end of the show, we'll open up the platform to everybody in the chat and we'll ask some questions from the folks in the chat.
Beautiful.
And I have AOS, attention deficit squirrel. So the wrong question. We'll be talking about how sandwiches prove that aliens are actually interdimensional elves.
Doesn't everybody know that?
Yeah.
What type of sandwich?
Specifically, the hoagie. The hoagie is really that.
That makes sense.
That's what proves it. But it's not really on point for today's show. They're making the frogs gay. Sorry, I somehow this week turned into Alex Jones and like 12 different shows, and so now that's all I'm thinking about.
So this is going to be a 12-parter.
Yeah, exactly. Building 7 came down because they're turning the frogs gay with the radio lasers.
Nice.
All right, I will stop distracting, please.
Distract away. That's why we're all here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I'll just get out of the way at the beginning because I know this gets asked pretty much every episode. Mm-hmm. Everybody always wants to know: have you seen or heard a Bigfoot yourself?
I'm going to okay. So this is the only answer I can give right now. No, I have not seen a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Well, that actually gets complicated. Let's say Bigfoot. I have not seen a Bigfoot. I have, however, seen a pterodactyl.
Wow, that's cool.
So, yeah. Unfortunately, it's off topic, but, it happens. It got me into it.
That's not too common either. You don't hear anyone say that.
I mean, not... Everyone's like, oh, okay. They're common in the North Texas, Southern Oklahoma region, and a lot of people have seen them. Oh, yeah. It's... So, funny story. Funny hee-hee, not ha-ha. So 1992, 12. It's summer. I'm fishing in a creek just outside of Dallas called the 10 Mile Creek. It's just so people know, most of North Texas, southern Oklahoma, the reason cotton and really cotton grows really, really well here is we sit on this giant limestone slab because Texas used to be underwater, and then at some point the ocean realized, oh crap, I'm in Texas, and water doesn't like to be in Texas, and just left. So we sit on this giant limestone slab, and it does. There's just a few feet of soil, right? And really, in most places, it's not even that deep, but it's deep around where the creeks are, right, where you have the flooding, and so we have some of these creeks, like the 10 Mile, that are, surprise, surprise, 10 miles long. Texans are great at a lot of things. Naming things aren't one of them. That's why you'll find, well, what's this? It's the 10 Mile Creek. Why? It runs for 10 miles. Okay. What's that? That's Mesquite, Texas. Why? Because there's a lot of mesquites out there. It's like there's a Texoma Lake. Why is it called Lake Texoma, you may ask? Because it's between Texas and Oklahoma. Okay, I get it. Like Round Rock, I'm not kidding when I say this. Why is there a Round Rock, Texas? Because there's literally this big round rock in the creek, and you knew it was safe to cross because you could see the rock. So, like, Texans are amazing at a lot of things, people. I love Texas. We are but we cannot name anything. Our names are terrible. So, anyway, back to my point. So the creek, so we have these limestone creeks that are, 15, 20 feet wide and can get deep into the earth, 15, sometimes 30 feet deep. And so I was fishing with a friend. He had already left because it's getting about 11 o'clock. And I hear this noise, and I don't recognize the call. Like, I spent all my life in the creeks, right? And being outside. So I'm like, I don't know what this is. And so I poked my head out from behind the tree line, because, again, there's sort of this place where the wall had collapsed in on itself. And so it serves as a bank, so you can get into it. Well, I was already into the tree line. I poked my head out. And at first, I think I see the largest blue heron I've ever seen in my life. This thing's like, the wingspan's 8 to 10 feet, right? So big, but not unbelievably big, just really big. And I'm like, man, that's a big blue heron. And then it's gliding at this point, and the wingtip is 5 feet from my face, and I realize the thing's got no feathers. It's the right color, so it's that Payne's gray, sort of bluish gray, and it's doing the wings. The wings look like a heron, but it did that S curve thing with its neck, right? That cranes will do. So it looked like a crane. But then I realized there's no feathers. And what I thought had been the legs, when a heron will fly, they put their legs out behind them.
Right.
Except I see the legs, and then I realize what I'm seeing is a tail with this flanged end.
No way.
It was like this sort of rounded diamond shape, and I just watch it, and it just goes and makes this bank and follows the rip, and it's gone. And that's all it is. So I got a good solid look at this thing, and I'm like, what? And my friend comes back down the hill. He's like, hey, you coming or what? And I'm like, did you just see the pterodactyl that flew by? And he laughed. He's like, come on, we're going to miss lunch. And I'm like,
and you're like, no,
pterodactyl. And then I realized and let me say this. I am a young earth creationist. I believe dinosaurs are still alive. I was raised believing dinosaurs are still alive. I know these stories. It's why I got into cryptozoology. I didn't believe my story. I thought I had to be wrong, because these things exist in the Congo. They exist in Loch Ness, in these strange, or the Pacific Northwest, these strange, bizarre, far off places. It's not Dallas, Texas, right? Or just outside Dallas, Texas. And then as I got older, I heard about these pterosaur sightings in South Texas. Well, Texas is a big place. South Texas is a good long ways away. And these sounded different a little bit. So I'm like, okay, I still didn't believe me. It was literally not until I had known Ken Gerhardt for a couple of years by this point. Long story short, conversation starts. I find out there's other people who've had these encounters, and I see, and I do an interview for one of his shows that he was doing with Lyle Blackburn, and I get to see a model made up by other people who'd seen one in Oklahoma, and I'm like, that is what I saw. And I found out that the people had been seeing these things in my area, and I got my own collection of stories, And I found out there's a bunch of other things that are seen around Dallas, and so that led to my book. Well, one of my
Wow.
books, the Metroplex Monsters. The rest of my books are on other things, but yeah, that's what led to that one. So, and that got me. And I known Craig Wool here for years. So I'd go to Jefferson every year. That met me up with Tex, and now that's what brought me to you, wonderful people. So
That's
no,
awesome.
That
which is a long
wonderful
way
person.
to say, no, I've never seen a Sasquatch. Well, I've never seen a Bigfoot. There's some. That's a whole other conversation, but we'll start with. I've not seen a Bigfoot.
Well, we'll start with this one and then we'll filter over to that one because we do
Sounds
have
like a
an
plan.
hour. So.
Yes, we do.
Now, one thing I do want to point out since we started doing this show, and we're trying to learn what we can, and we're kind of still trying to get our feet wet. We have been hearing a lot of connections between Bigfoot and other creatures out there. So it doesn't surprise me when you mention a pterodactyl.
Right.
I mean, it is one of those things where you hear fewer people say that than you do ghosts or Bigfoot or
Right.
you know, shadow people, things like that. But I mean, when we had, was it Tex or was it Gary Spike Jr. that mentioned the Dogman?
It was Tex.
It was Tex.
Yeah, because Tex ran across the Dogman twice.
Yeah. So when we started hearing about the Dogman, you know, we saw that, okay, there's a connection to another creature that is still not really been fully discovered, at least socially acknowledged, I guess is the best way to put it.
Right.
Socially acknowledged. I like that. Yes.
So it doesn't surprise me that there are other creatures out there that just haven't been really tapped into, and I could see a lot of people would actually mistake one for another. So they'd hear a noise and they'd automatically assume it's one type of creature because that's one that they're out pursuing, or that's one they heard the most stories about, or whatever.
Where they're afraid of.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a great point. Real quick, people asked what the book was.
Yes.
Metroplex Monsters, Dallas Demons. Okay, guys, if you ever write a book, never ever write a really long subtitle because you're going to forget. It's Dallas Demons, Fort Worth Goatmen, and Other Terrors of the Trinity River. But yeah, you can find this on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much anyone. But if you go to SIRU Papers, it has my links to all of my books, the stuff on eschatology, theology, and other crypto stuff.
Now, we ask a lot of our authors this question, and we sprung it on the last one, and now we're going to spring it on you.
Oh, please.
Is there any chance that any of our viewers can actually get a signed copy of your book?
Oh yeah, I sign things all the time. Absolutely would love it. Yeah.
So they'd like to request that.
Yeah, if they want to request it, so here's the deal. I can actually mail them a copy. You know, I can sell, and so if you get it through Amazon, the only way for me to sign it is for you to track me down and stalk me, and then run me down like some sort of crazed fugitive. And but I'll be happy to sign it anyway. Or you know, if at Jefferson, I will be there selling books. Or if you still happen to have one, come on by. I'd be happy to sign it. But if you want to reach, you can email me at sirupapers@yahoo.com and just say, hey, can I get a book off you? And I'll sell you a copy, and I will mail it to you, and I will sign it off and draw a little picture in it too.
That's cool.
I'm putting it on there right now.
She's going to be ordering hers as soon as we get off the show anyway.
Well, I'm seeing y'all in less than a week, so
I was going to work that into the conversation. A lot of people didn't know that quite yet.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll be guys. Forget I said anything about anything.
What? Okay? Yeah, just disregard the last.
Disregard that. That didn't happen. These are not the no.
But
anyway,
no.
But yeah, I'll sign anything.
Well, she is taking notes right now.
Okay, did I do that right?
Oh, I don't know.
SIRU Papers. Yeah, that works. Yeah, perfect.
Beautiful.
Email me.
Okay, we're gonna pin
But back to your question. So, I think there's a couple of issues, or one issue that I think that needs to be addressed, and we can actually talk about look at the Chupacabra as a great example of this. which is confusion about the phenomena itself in names, right? Um, I think one of the biggest problems that we have in the Bigfooting community, particularly, is we have a bunch of different phenomena that's going by the same name, right? We're putting them all in the same thing, and the problem is that's confusing the data, right?
Mm.
A great example of this is the chupacabra. We watched in real time how the word chupacabra evolved to mean any cryptid or any unknown animal, an unknown phenomena, basically in Latin America and South Texas, right? It starts in Puerto Rico about the same time that that species came out, right? And that's a really important aspect to this whole thing, because the first woman who saw what we now call the chupacabra, she described it as looking like the thing from Species, right? Because the movie had just come out.
Mm.
Well, the problem is the art when the newspaper artists historically, when it comes to this subject, are terrible at this. They take it literally. So he designed something that looks like H.R. Geiger designed it. And so now we have this drawing of what looks like an alien with spikes on it, and then sometimes it's got vampire fangs, sometimes it's got a proboscis, and then so that image gets into the zeitgeist, and the name gets into the zeitgeist, and people see other things, right?
Yeah.
And so one of these things I do believe is the koi dogs that we see now. These blue dogs. I prefer the words or the name Cuero Canid that I coined years ago because I like the alliteration, but it doesn't matter. But these poor hairless koi dogs that are running around there, which by the way, koi dog is a hybrid of a coyote and a dog. Again, Texans are terrible at naming things. I'm sorry. But but there does seem to be they seem to be their own unique species at this point, right? Which is not uncommon for breeds to create something new. There's a theory that the red wolf is actually just a hybrid of the traditional gray wolf or timber wolf with coyotes, and that they became their own thing. There's a big debate about that. So these things are running around. People see them, and then of course artists now blend that with the still ones. So that's why we had some look like these like kangaroos with spikes. Others said they look like aliens with spikes, and no one could figure anything out. That was actually why I was a big proponent to say they didn't exist, because we didn't there wasn't the consistent description of a chupacabra like there is with, say, Bigfoot or even the pterosaurs, right? Like the pterosaurs, we can go all the way back to Egypt with and say, hey, this is what these are, and we can see the commonalities. Though we weren't getting that with the chupacabra. And then I talked to my father. Was like, well, I mean, it's about creatures that are desiccating these farm animals, right? I'm like, well, yeah. And he goes, well, he's like, my father talked about that in the 30s because they grew up outside of between West and Waco. And so he's like, yeah, that happened to them all the time. I'm like, so there's a real phenomena here. But why aren't we seeing these commonalities in the descriptions? Well, then we find the koi dogs. And it's like, well, those koi dogs aren't running down and draining the blood out of chickens and goats and cows. So that means this thing factored into this whole mess, but it can't be the phenomena itself. And that's why I started. That's why I started to realize, hold on, we're combining things. And again, while working on my book, Metroplex Monsters, Dynaless Demons, Forward Goat, and Other Terrors of the Trinity River, available at Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble. Anyway, while doing that,
for a limited time only.
Trust me, not that limited. My trunk is full of them. So yeah, no. While doing the book, I realized, hold on. I started seeing things like the word Goatman or the name Goatman all over Dallas. I started realizing, well, Bigfoot were getting called Goatman because of what happened at Lake Worth, but then people were actually seeing Goatman over here, and over here it didn't. It's just it's a ghost and it's a myth. And I'm like, what's happening? And that's when I started realizing a lot of times these rare creatures are oftentimes put in the same box. So we have Bigfoot, we have some paranormal phenomena, we may have We may have entirely other creatures like dogs. They're all in this box. And that's why we can't get anywhere, because we don't realize we have no way. Because, and this is the same we have on Texas Front Porch now that we've developed, because we don't know what Bigfoot is. We don't know what it isn't, right? Like if I were to tell you, hey, I got this problem with bats on my property. Every day about noon, they fly in and they set my cattle on fire. You would look at me like, they're doing what now? You're like, that's not a bat. We know what bats are. We know how they behave. So we know that if I'm talking about something that's flying around midday, setting fire to your cattle, it's not a bat, right?
Right.
So we know what it isn't. The problem is we don't know what they are, so we don't know what they aren't. And a lot of this stuff's getting put in the same box. And that's our problem.
Agree.
Well, I could believe. I mean, I could understand that. Again, we come more from the ghost hunting aspect of the paranormal. So, I associate a lot of these conversations with what I've experienced and what I know as far as ghost hunting goes. And I can't tell you how many times we've heard people like refer to angry ghosts as demons.
Oh, right.
Or, spirits of different kinds. People will associate it with other types of spirits. And like I was saying earlier, with different types of animals and stuff, there's probably a lot out there that haven't even been talked about yet. There's probably a lot of those old experiences when more people lived out in the woods and more people lived out in the forests and stuff like that, and that was more of a common thing. They probably witnessed creatures that we don't witness nearly as much anymore, or if we do, we either A, won't talk about it because we know everybody will just shrug their shoulders and think you're nuts, or B, they don't want a bunch of people coming onto their property and start, running around camping out with guns and trying to shoot whatever's moving out there,
Right. Well, so the modern day has really 2 or 3 different problems, right? Something happened around World War I, and I don't know exactly what it is. I mean, we can. That's part of a longer conversation, but it became out of fashion to believe that a lot of these creatures could still exist. Like you can find, very honest articles about what we would consider to be prehistoric animals being alive, and scientists even saying, "Hey, we're going to go do this exploration in the Congo or in South America because we have reports." Like people were actively okay with these things, but around World War I, something radically changes in academia. And so once in the academic world became entrenched in this very specific atheistic Darwinian view of the world, right? There is no such thing as the supernatural. This one interpretation of Darwin's theories is the only one that's allowed. Anything that comes out of these 2 boxes is just immediately rejected, right? So it's one of those things where the academics became very locked into a very, very specific and narrow viewpoint. Then you have, and so once that happens, then the elite get into it, and that sort of sets the tone, right? Well, now you're uncool, right? If you do these things, then you have. I just saw that. So it becomes unpopular, and so now it's like. Now you're laughing stock because the guy in the white lab coat said you couldn't have seen what you saw, right? So people start, you become the laughing stock. So that's pressure 1. Pressure 2, particularly in the modern world, is if you see something that's truly exotic outside of the peer pressure of you becoming the town crazy. If it's proven true, you could lose. Particularly if you work in the forest or you're a cattle rancher or whatever. You could lose access to that property. So it definitely becomes that additional pressure. It's like, A, do I want the hassle of having everyone think I'm crazy? And B, do I really want the federal bird and turtle people coming down and shutting down my ranch?
Right.
Or shutting down my logging industry. So there's a lot of these external pressures that make people not want to do it. And plus, we as humans are pack animals, right? Sadly, the reason that usually, a lot of good things that are good takes so long to happen is because we have to get enough people behind us to do this movement. Because most people don't want to move as one person, right? No one wants to be the one guy who's like, yes, all people are equal. We want the herd to move with us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so so a lot of people I think would want to come forward, except they know that the herd isn't going to come with them. And so it's just that herd mentality of, well, if I can't, because if I go and I speak, even if if people believe me or would believe me, they're not going to respond. They're going to hide out because they know everyone else is going to would call them crazy with me. So it's just, we don't talk about it. So we just stay put. But now that shows like this and Texas Front Porch exist, now that we can, it's easier to communicate. Now that it's easier to get these books published. Uh, People are coming forth. It's becoming more and more acceptable to talk about these things. So we can actually start figuring out where the flaws in our theories are. We can start figuring out what we've gotten right, what we've gotten wrong. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the way most people are going about it. It becomes a fight. It's like, no, my interpretation is right versus this interpretation. We're fighting instead of actually figuring things out. But,
Yeah.
I have hope for the future.
Well, yeah, and in that context, for me, it's also older generation versus the newer generation,
Yeah.
because in like, and I'm going to say courts because that's
Mm-hmm.
a sensitive spot for me right now. You talk to an older judge versus a newer judge, they're going to have a different opinion and viewpoint on the way the world works.
Mm-hmm.
So, actually, I'll take the judge off the table and I'll say a mechanic. So
Okay.
you got an old mechanic and a new mechanic, right? An old mechanic sees you pull a battery out of your car and set it on the ground. Is going to say, "What the hell are you doing? Don't ever put your battery on the ground. That'll ruin the battery." Talk to a younger mechanic or a newer mechanic, and he sees you pull a battery out of your car and set it on the ground, and he doesn't care. And the reason why is because in the older days, they used to have glass bottoms for the batteries. And so when you set those on the ground, it would deplete the battery. It would ruin the battery. But they stopped making them that way, so it's no longer the case. But a lot of the old timers still have that mentality of you never set a car battery on the ground.
Right. Well, it's like refilling your battery with water.
Yeah.
When have you ever had to do that? We haven't had to do that for 30 years.
Yeah.
Because the way, like, I remember reading that in some manual. I'm like, why would I bother to put water in a battery? Like, why would I need to? Because we haven't needed to do that for nearly 30 years. I forget who said it, but they said that there's an old saying in science and academia that science changes at the gravesite, which is to say that as the old generation sort of dies off, the new generation is able to come in and bring these new ideas. Because the problem is, so many of these scientists are their doctorates, their money, their prestige is coming from a particular theory that's accepted. Well, if you come in, you bring this new theory that shows they're wrong. A good scientist should say, okay, hold on, let's prove it, let's test this theory, and if yours is right and I'm wrong, then great, we learned something, we moved on. The problem is money, prestige, all of that is tied into it. And we saw that even with Einstein, right? Like, everyone seems to think that he writes his 1915 papers, or was it 1905? I'm terrible with dates, but he writes it's this one year he writes these 5 papers. It's called the Miracle Year, right? We all seem to, it's like when we're telling the stories, like he writes these papers and boom, he's inventing the nuclear bomb. And he's doing all these things. It's like, no, like, he published these papers and nothing happened. No one cared. Everyone thought he was crazy. It was years before he was recognized as being correct. And we're still only now proving some of his theories with our technology. So, yeah, I mean, so we have, genuine pioneers who've been doing this research for a very long time, and they got the ball rolling. Nothing we were ever going to do is going to take away from that. And because they did the best with what they have. Well, now we have more, right? We've got more stories. We have better ways of actually comparing the data and actually looking at these things. And we're seeing discrepancies that don't make sense unless there's a problem in the data itself. We could understand why someone like John Green, who hears a story about Well, there's this creature that lives on my property. I don't. It only comes out at night, and it has red glowing eyes, and it's like 7, 8 feet tall, and looks like kind of a hairy thing. Him saying, "Okay, that must be Bigfoot," right? Like we can see why someone because that's the only data they had. Okay, well there
Right.
seems to be this giant ape-like creature. There's eye shine associated, so that's what it all has to be. So every time we talk, someone talks about these red glowing eyes, like, oh, it's just eye shine, right? It's not, it's not glowing eyes, it's eye shine, even if there's no flashlight around, right? So what we have though is you start looking at the data. Now we have better data, we have
Mm.
more stories, and it's like, hold up, these creatures over here, we have all these encounters of broad daylight sightings, and they're behaving like apes, right? They're been like, again, in my book, Metroplex Monsters, Dallas Demons, Dallas, Fort Worth Ghost Men, and Terrors
Order
available.
your copy today.
Order your copy today. There's a story where, I mean, again, this woman is personally known to me. She was driving, and like she sees it just drinking water out of the Trinity River. It's just a
Mm.
giant ape thing, broad daylight, just drinking water, right? We have all these stories of broad daylight encounters, and it just seems like a normal ape. But then we have some of these other stories. They're telepathic. They're moving through walls, or they're disappearing into the fog. They just vanish like a vapor. And you're like, okay, well, hold on. They have glowing eyes, like their eyes actually glow. Okay, maybe those aren't Bigfoot. Maybe
Mm.
that, and that's when you start asking the questions. Like, hold on. The reason we use the word Sasquatch is because Sasquatch is the name of a paranormal entity to the Indians of the Pacific Northwest. They were describing a spiritual creature, but there does seem to be similarities. Well, okay, but you know, hairy, sometimes mischievous, paranormal entities are described all throughout most cultures.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They do have, and there's other similarities here. It's like maybe we need to stop and say, maybe Sasquatch and Bigfoot aren't really the same thing. Maybe they're two separate entities. And what we have is, yes, there is a hominid, unknown to science, walking around doing its ape thing. Or maybe there's multiple species. I think there's definitely multiple species across the world, but maybe even here in the US, we're dealing with multiple species because there's some varying descriptions that, you know, maybe it's the difference between, a white-tailed deer and a mule deer, or maybe it's the difference between a white-tailed deer and a moose, right? We
Mm-hmm.
don't know yet. But so maybe it's all just one thing. They just have regional differences. We don't know. But even with that, there is clearly a physical hominid that's running around. It eats, it procreates, it drinks water out of the Trinity River for heaven only knows why. And it's for those who are native to Dallas, you don't want to drink water from the Trinity River ever.
Because they don't have the watershed law.
Yeah, exactly. No, dude, you know you come to the Trinity because you can smell it. That's how bad it is. But it's like these things seem to be real physical primates, and I think that's just a very, very small population. But then we have these other things that are not Bigfoot, and unfortunately, I really can't give more to this next part, because again, unfortunately, there are a lot of stories that were given that are in confidence. So I have to be very, very vague on this one. But I have an eyewitness that is, and again, personally known to me, very well trusted. This man's not a liar, and he has corroborating evidence. There are supernatural entities that are connected to, we'll use the term UFO. They're clearly supernatural entities, but they also have some degree of physicality, and they are very Bigfoot like, but they're distinct in some of their behaviors, uh, and they do match all these, like the truly bizarre stories, like they match up. So it's like there's clearly something there, and they do have some physical similarities to Bigfoot, but we know for a fact these are paranormal entities. They're connected to UFOs. So the problem is we have all these things going in the same box, and so we are our data is corrupted. Well, now we have this better data. We need the Bigfoot community to come together and start having calm, rational conversations. The problem is every side is fighting for the name Bigfoot. They're not actually fighting. They're not trying to understand the phenomena, and that's the problem. Because once you take the name Bigfoot out of it, it becomes really easy to see the different phenomena, right, and see it as something else. But we're so busy saying we need. It's like, no, this is what Bigfoot is. It is telepathic, and it likes to eat cotton candy that it steals when it's invisible. And then we got the guys like, no, it is an ape, and it flings poo whenever you drive by. It's like, guys, stop. You're fighting over the name Bigfoot. You're not, which makes it about ego, not academics.
Yeah.
I believe in God, but I know Sasquatch, or let me phrase it, there is a hominid running around because there's evidence for it. This is a question of science. Blue whales existing has nothing to do with faith, right? It's science. Either they exist or they don't, right? Same thing with Bigfoot. The problem is we now have paranormal phenomena wrinkled into it, and I'll take that next step. The paranormal phenomena, either mimicking it is either direct or incidental, but it's starting to feel more and more deliberate. Like it's using Bigfoot to hide its own existence because they don't want to upset the apple cart, right? C.S. Lewis wrote in Screw Tape Letters, not Mere Christianity, Screw Tape Letters. There's this line I'm going to botch terribly, but essentially he talks about the idea of a materialist witch, which is something that would allow a human to believe in the paranormal without actually believing in the paranormal, right? There would be a material excuse for it. It's not, oh, I'm clearly dealing with a supernatural entity. It's like, no, it's an extraterrestrial, right? It's like, sure, it's telepathic and walks through walls and breaks all forms of science and disappears anytime someone mentions Jesus, but it's really an alien, right? So it's like, sure, it's abducting me and torturing me at night, and but that's fine. That's fine. It's all we're intergalactic brethren. And
they wipe my memory out after.
Yeah, they wipe my memory of the fact that they're sexually exploiting me and tearing me apart, and it's like, but they're good people. What okay, guys. I'm sorry. There's just no way some dude from Zeta Reticulon is flying hundreds of thousands of light years to probe you. Your butt is not that interesting.
Does it really stink?
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't get me wrong. There are butts out there that I assure you are far more interesting than yours. But it's like that. It's like, just stop and think for a moment, guys. Like, even like all the old UFO researchers, like John Keel, they came out and they're like, guys, these aren't what you think they are. Even the dude who wrote Communion, who still thinks they're aliens, even he's like, yeah, they're not whatever we think they are up here. That's not what they really are. There's something else going on. Well, the Bigfoot phenomena is the same way. There is something going on. I think it's, at this point, I believe it is definitely trying to hide as Bigfoot. So that, because that way when people are like, no, we're fighting over whether or not it's Bigfoot. Not like, guys, let's just call the ape over here Bigfoot. But what you talked about had horns and is telepathic. That's not an ape, right? It's like, I've heard, I swear people are like, well, yeah, the Bigfoot I saw had horns. But no.
Have you heard people say that?
Yes.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I've never heard anyone say that. Really? Have you?
Not yet.
Huh.
Not till
Yeah.
now, but...
Yeah, welcome to the party, pal. Yeah, no. There are people like, yeah, no, it's the Bigfoot. Shows up every time I'm home. Guys, let's just be honest here. Larger primates don't have a single nesting ground. They have areas that they cover, right? Like big cats, right? They corral them. The physical Bigfoot are almost exclusively seen during the day. Don't get me wrong. There are people who see them at night. Absolutely. In fact, I got a good friend of mine who didn't believe in Bigfoot. Heard him going up and down the creek. Again, actually mentioned in Metroplex Monsters, Dallas Demons, Fort Worth Goat Men, and I'm done.
Get your copy today.
It's one of those things where they are, but I mean, they do seem to be following traditional large ape behavior. Then we have these other things. It's like if it's on your property all the time and it shows up every time you're showing up, it's not a Bigfoot. It's something else.
Hmm.
Again, that was sort of that was the big fight between Tex and I for the longest time at his favorite hunting area or Bigfoot hunting area at Brown Springs, which is a great location for a Sasquatch, and he's seen them. But then he'd have these stories where like he's there and it's fall, right? Leaves all over the ground. He's making fire, and again, red glowing eyes. The form walks show, and then it just disappears back into the. He hears nothing. I'm like, dude, there's no way an 800-pound primate is walking through an entire area covered in grass,
Crunchy.
or crunchy, yeah, these crunchy
foliage.
leaves,
Yeah.
and not have any sound or and there was mud back there. We couldn't even find prints. And he's like, but I saw it. I'm like, I'm not doubting that, but it made no noise, right? So, and then we have people talk about, well, I saw it had horns, or again, it's talking to me telepathically. That's not. I'm just going to go out and say, not a Bigfoot. It's something else. It's something much, much older. It's something much. It is definitely not a part of the same phenomena, but it does seem to be looking like it has the same phenomena.
Mm.
By the way, I see Amy's comment that North America does not have any ape species. Well, who told you that? See, that's the problem here.
Mm.
There are no known ape species, right? And that's actually one of the arguments for that we have that scientists use as to why there can't be a Bigfoot. Is because, well, we don't have any fossil record of there being apes in this area. Well, again, that's the whole point. Bigfoot shouldn't be here, but people are seeing it, and it is clear, and there is a clear hominid that it eats, it breathes, it does whatever. It's a very, very small population. It being here in our neck of the woods defies the traditional Darwinian narrative that academia likes. That's the problem. This is why they don't do research on things like the London hammer. They reject it outright, and they will not look at it. They won't look at things like the Delk print, which is it's a theropod footprint that has a human footprint in it.
Oh.
And they've done scans. We've done the Creation Evidence Museum has done CAT scans of it, and you can see the Delk print isn't carved. They were made at the same time because you can actually see the compression levels in the rock.
Interesting.
And we've done this with several other things where it's like you can see these things these weren't carved like they claim. They were made when it was still mud and it was turned to stone. It's like we can see the compression layers. There's all kinds of out of place artifacts that science will not look at because it calls their theories into question. The reason people are not looking at pterosaurs like I saw, or Bigfoot like we're looking at here, or any of these other truly exotic animals is they call these things into question. And there is that they call the mainstream narrative into question. And it is the problem is we, as the mainstream scientists out there, their money is made on a narrative. It's the same narrative that governments like because it allows them to manipulate to just feel free to manipulate the populace, to lie to us about everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. Is that if people were to know that history isn't what we've been told, that history and science isn't really what the reality of it is, people are gonna be like, well, hold up. Maybe some of this other stuff you've been talking about is a lie as well. Again, what's the big meme of 2021? I'm out of conspiracy theories because they're all true. Right? That's the problem. It's like, well, we're out of conspiracy theories here, folks. So the problem is we're finally able to start seeing these things and seeing them in more detail. And we're finding, again, we find new animals all the time. The problem is, I'm gonna tell you a story. It's actually the reason I did not become an archaeologist. That's what I was studying to be. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to leave some names out to protect, well, just because I don't want to get into trouble. There was a particular archaeologist that I studied under. He was a really good guy. And he was telling the story about how he found a location here in Texas, right? And they did all of the radiocarbon dating for it, and it came back 26,000 years old. Well, that's a problem. People weren't supposed to be in Texas 26,000 years ago. Now, there's lots of people who found other sites. Again, sites shut down by particularly the Mexican government. That's another wild story. But there are sites shut down by governments all the time because they find the wrong thing. But he found it, and he basically tells the story of how he looked on a map and found that there was that coal was mined like a few miles away. And the way, and he was telling the story as if he had come up with this wonderful thing. He's like, well, so his conclusion was that they had used coal to make all the fires, and that corrupted the site. Now, was there any evidence that coal was used? No. Was there any evidence that anyone in the area had found or used coal? No. So how are you saying that the coal was used and that's what contaminated the site? Well, because the site can't be that old. That's not science. Yeah. That's propaganda. Straight up.
Yeah.
I kind of want to go back to a little bit to what you were saying before about people who are making money off of certain theories and off of certain things. And I believe a lot of that is true, but I also believe that, like you were saying, it's the ego. People don't want to admit they're wrong.
Right.
You know, being able to say, you know what, I have no idea. This is my experience, and this is what I perceive it as. You know, hearing you say, you know, not everything is a Bigfoot. So if we classify everything as experiences and find the similarities between stories, you could kind of create more of a separation of the different types of creatures you're coming across. Now, I did see a comment, and I'm sorry it's gone up the list a little ways, but somebody made the comment that the government will just squash, or that with cheap cameras and everything coming out now, it's harder. Oh, here it is. The world is rapidly shrinking. That's true, but the government is not naive, and they could easily put out a ton of false documentation, false information to confuse people even more. So just because we have more cameras, so do they. Just because we have more people out there that can share stories, they have more people out there that can create BS stories.
Oh, yeah.
So
and let's point. Oh, absolutely. And let's point two things out. Yes, we have way more cameras than we did. Everyone's got one in their pocket, right? Like this. But here's the problem. This is a great piece of technology, but its lens is not going to go very far. Right. This is designed for taking selfies or something a few feet out, or taking amazing pictures of like landscapes, right?
Right.
Where there's not fine detail. The problem is everyone's got these things because they have everyone like, well, why don't we get any good pictures of Bigfoot? Well, what you've got is something that's not designed to find Bigfoot.
Right.
Right. Like, let's look at like if you were an actual nature photographer. I know people who do photography, like nature photography professionally. They have 10,000. Yeah, exactly. They have $10,000 distance lenses, right? My favorite story goes back to when what was it, Blue Earth or whatever, the Planet Earth documentary came out, right? They had like 3 minutes of footage, I think, of a snow leopard in this one show. It took one guy camping out 3 years in a blind with $20,000 worth of camera equipment to get that 3 minutes of film. And it was taken over numerous years. That's sort of the problem that we have here.
National Geographic, that's exactly what it takes to do episodes for National Geographic. I mean, they wait forever for that one shot. or that that one piece of
Exactly.
film.
And we have again, it's like, guys, going out with your cell phones is not going to prove Bigfoot is real. Like, these things are survived by staying the hell away from us, right?
Very wisely, because I want to do the same thing.
Yeah, I want to stay away from people. Like, I get it. Like, I get absolutely. But like, that's sort of the problem here is everyone's like, why can't we get a good picture? Well, because it's smart enough to basically to not be predictable, right? And no one's going to pay some guy to to spend 5 years in a blind with $30,000 worth of equipment to get 30 seconds of footage of a Bigfoot family, right? Like, no one's paying for that right now. If someone would pay for that to happen, we'd probably get somewhere, particularly if we had some better data to say this is where to go look. 5 years later, he may get something, right? And so, again, I was reading somewhere, there's a guy, people who actually research wolverines, a known animal, right? A known animal. We know where it lives. We know what it eats. We know where, all of these things, and they research them. They will go out, and they'll go out for a whole season and not see a single wolverine. Well, wolverines aren't the smartest, animal out there. So you have a large bipedal primate, which means they're gonna be friggin' smart. They know enough to stay away from us. They're mobile, and they're paying attention for us. Of course, we're not going to find them unless we really did some good digging. So it's like the fact that we can't see them, or we have not found them officially, is not necessarily, again, evident. It's like, well, that's why the scientific community hasn't proven it. There's enough evidence to show these things are real. I mean, straight up, we've got the evidence for it. The problem is they don't want to look at it because it does call their narrative into question. And the thing about the government, disinformation is a real thing, absolutely a real thing, and that's
sleight of hand.
Yeah,
it's all sleight of hand. I mean, that's why, like, one of my favorite truths about like the whole UFO thing is that so many of the big name UFO researchers were actively being manipulated by the DOD because they would feed them little pieces of information, and they go off on these tangents. They'd make whole films about it, and they use that to cover their black ops materials, right? The CIA loved the UFO phenomenon as well because it allowed them to cover up a lot of their flights into Russia. So that's not to say the UFO phenomenon doesn't exist, but we have to understand that our government has their own agendas, and they will use this information to move it around however they want. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a large disinformation program about Bigfoot, not necessarily because they care about Bigfoot one way or the other, but because it keeps us from realizing other things. Again, why are there paranormal entities that seem to look like Bigfoot? Maybe because they don't want us to realize they're paranormal entities, right? They want us to think of them as Bigfoot because it gives them cover to do what they want to do. So so these are issues that can be resolved over time. But what we need to do as a Bigfoot community, and I'm more of a journalist, right? I don't have any more love for Bigfoot than I do the Cadborosaurus. It's a dinosaur that lays Cadbury eggs. I'm kidding about that. It's a real thing. But it's like, I'm a journalist, right? But it's like if we really want to get anywhere in the Bigfoot community, we've got to stop fighting over the name Bigfoot and really start analyzing the data objectively and realizing that there's different phenomena. And then maybe we can actually get somewhere and maybe find the one guy who we could drop, $100,000 on and be like, you go in the woods and you don't come back without those photographs and a body. And then, maybe we'll have.
They become the body.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And then they become the body because they showed up in somebody's weed field.
Stay away from those crops.
Yes.
Stay away from the crops, people. It's not hippies growing them. Just saying.
Not anymore.
Yeah, no, they haven't. Hippies have not been the ones growing weed in a long time. Yeah, the duckbill platypus is a great example. People thought they were made up. Same thing with gorillas. People forget this. Gorillas were thought to be a myth up until very, very recently. The panda was claimed to be a myth.
A myth. That's
But,
right.
like the coelacanth, like there are all kinds of animals that everyone thought. They just discovered a species of cat in France that everyone thought was a myth because it was they were calling it some sort of a fox cat, and they just discovered it.
Huh.
And again, France, not the Congo,
Right.
where the forest, where the jungle is so freaking deep you can only go like 1 mile a day
Yeah.
linearly. France.
Yeah.
They get airplanes and cars and movie pictures and everything, and they just discovered this thing.
Huh.
So what do you talk? Were you telling me that
Right.
North America, which is still largely almost entirely uninhabited, like that's the myth, right? Is that we're everywhere? No, we're not. We're not everywhere. But again, Canada's it only has 30 million people in it, right? Like I said, you could tell me there's Bigfoot riding mastodons with fights over giant beavers. I'd buy it. No one's there to see it.
Jousting.
Right? Everyone
Yeah.
jousting. Like, okay, I'd buy it because no one is there's no one lives in Canada. They live in Toronto and they live in one other, like some other city. Like that's it. That's all they live in. Ontario. Thank you. That's it. But like here in Texas, right? I call it the Green Wall. We live in small concrete islands. We drive on our concrete roads, and that's where we are. You can see from space, right? It,
That throw you off?
yeah. Well, so yeah, it threw me off because that's a great point, and I want to. So again, we'll talk about that in a second. Concrete. So we live in these. We live clustered together on concrete islands. We drive on concrete roads, and on the edges of each road, what do? Well, we slope them so the rain runs off, and then we mow everything, and then we have this nice, perfect tree line where the shrub brushes grow, and we can't see into them. Most of these green spaces, you could march whole armies through. No one would see anything, ever. We build around the floodplain so that we don't get our properties destroyed. And what do? What do we have? Particularly for a Bigfoot that likes to use creeks and rivers as navigation points, we have created a green wall to hide them. We can't. You could, again, whole armies could move through some of these places. No one would ever see them. Broad daylight with elephants and everything. Like,
that's a very good
you
point.
could march them through because we don't live everywhere. We live in these very, very tight pockets of people.
Well, it really opens my eyes because a couple months back we drove all the way across the country to Florida. And I can't tell you how many long stretches of road we were on. Just like you said, they're just perfect rows of trees. But when you look into them, you can't see very far. In fact, we found a couple houses that were abandoned in the middle of all those trees. It's literally 20 feet off the side of the road, but you don't see it. You don't see it until you're right on top of it.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yep.
Yeah, I call it the green wall. I'm like, we've literally actually created our lifestyle to essentially keep them hidden. That's all we've literally made life easier for them to hide from us. Like Dallas, Texas. The Dallas-Fort Worth area has over 7 million people, definitely closer to 8 now with everyone moving to Texas. It's one of those things where this is not we're a large we're one of the 7th largest conurbations in the United States. We have Bigfoot here. We have pterosaurs here. We have what looks like, at least now he may have left, but again, what appears to be some form of mosasaur in the Trinity River, right? Like these things are here and they hide because we aren't in nature anymore. We've made it way easier. Well, giant sloths are probably South America, but like we live in these little tiny areas. Like again, look at a satellite map of Earth, right? At night, you can see where everyone lives. And even here in Dallas, Texas, there are areas where no one goes. Like when was the last time anyone has gone more than 100 yards away from an actual road? And this does include dirt roads. Like more than 100 yards off of a dirt road. I don't know. I know a handful of people who can say they've been more than 100 yards away from a dirt road. But when you think about it, even was like, well, I go hiking all the time on trails made by people that people stick to. There's all they have to do is stay more than 30 feet away from you and be in
Mm-hmm.
that brush half the time. You'll never
Right.
see them. Like we're all indoor kitties at this point. Like we're not Davy Crockett who had an encounter marching through some uninhabited forest.
Mm.
We drive on concrete roads. When we go hiking in the nature, we go to the park that has been designated as a park, and we stay on the trails. Even when you're primitive hiking, you're no more than half a mile to a mile away from a road. We don't ever really get into the primitive as modern humans anymore. That's a handful of people, and those handfuls of people are having encounters because they're where the Bigfoot like to be, where
Mm.
they feel safe because we ain't there anymore.
Man, that's mind-boggling and absolutely true.
That makes so much sense, though.
I do kind of want to just point out something as well. From a lot of the conversations I've heard and from a lot of back and forth that I've heard with people is a lot of people also tend to think of these creatures in the same aspect of humans.
Hmm.
Yes.
So they seem to think that their capabilities are as limited as ours are. And I actually did an experiment with my son today. We were out in a camping area, paved road. Actually, it was dirt road right off a paved road. But anyway, but we were walking our dog, and I had the dog on our leash, and it was extended out all the way. And I think it's about what, a 12-foot leash.
I think so, something like that.
And I said, "Hey, you want to see how good our dog's hearing is?" He's like, "Yeah." So I whispered really quiet, "Scout, come." Scout heard me, turned around, and came running right at me.
Yeah.
And this is a whisper from 12 feet away that most people wouldn't have heard, but that dog was able to pick up on that noise and follow the command that I gave him.
Mm-hmm.
My son was completely dumbfounded by the fact that we did this. And so, for me, I have to acknowledge these creatures are far more in tune with the environment. They can hear better, they can smell better, they can see better, they can move smoother. You mentioned a little bit about how it being fall and the creature ran really fast, but it didn't leave any noise. And how is that possible? That's when it goes into theories and guessing. Because for me, maybe it has a way to cancel out that sounds for our hearing. And what I mean by that is, we have technology now where you got those sound canceling headphones where you put them on and it cancels all the sound around you.
Right. Yeah.
But as humans, we also filter out background noise a lot. If we're hearing constant background noise over time, our brain starts filtering out that noise to focus on other noises like conversations and things like that. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But it just makes me theorize more. And I think that's a big thing with us is that we share theories, but we never state anything as fact, especially when it comes to Bigfoot. But for ghosts and things like that, we never state anything as fact, because the minute we feel, for us, the minute we go out and say, it's a fact that every household has a ghost in it.
Right.
Yeah.
We feel that we lose credibility by making statements.
And so here's the thing. I'm right there with you. I'm about the conversation, right? So again, just going back to the thing with Tex, where again he's having these creatures appear in front of him.
Right.
Well, the thing is, that's at Brown Springs, which is highly paranormal, and again, that's where we had the whole, clearly paranormal event. Gary Spikes Sr., who's in the chat, was there with us. It was a nuts event. So that's why I chalked that one up to the paranormal. And this is the danger of theories. And again, I'm the first one to theorize, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we have to stay grounded in what people actually observe. This is, again, something I learned while writing the book was, I'm not going to do the bit again, don't worry. I realized there's a difference between what people say is seen versus what people actually see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people actually say, we'll go on here and say, this is what happened to me. But then you see the folklore, right? You see the stories. We actually have to get into the actual people telling us what occurred to them. And when you do that, you start noticing that there are some interesting differences and interesting distinctions. I think there's a lot going on that we aren't really privy to. And again, because we've isolated ourselves, people who look at UFOs don't look at people who are into Bigfoot don't usually look at pterosaurs. It's on and on and on. We're broken up into these groups. That's why I like to be a generalist. We don't know anything about anything, so how could you dedicate yourself to one of these, to one bit of information anyway?
Right.
But when you start looking at it from the 50,000 foot view, you do start seeing overlaps, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do start seeing things. And again, the problem is the creationists won't talk to the atheists, and the atheists won't talk to the spiritualists, and the spiritualists won't talk to, well, anyone. So it's, so we have these, so the worst part is everyone has information that usually that they like, and they reject the information they don't like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, again, when I talk to a UFO person, I'm like, well, okay, guys, so what do you do with the C4 Foundation that has 400 accounts of people ending their UFO encounter with traditional Christian, exorcism techniques? They're like, well, that's all fake. What do you mean it's all fake? I've done it. Like, I've helped people who've had, again, it's like, well, why, even in your own accounts, you have UFO encounters, but we have all this other phenomena that looks like it's paranormal. Well, it's not paranormal. What? Like, if you throw in something that doesn't agree with their preconceived notions, they reject it. So the problem is, what makes it even worse is we're not even talking to the other people within our fields, right? And so again, the paranormal Bigfooters don't like to talk to the ape guys. The ape guys don't want to talk to the paranormal because they're fighting over the name Bigfoot. And so we can't figure out what's what. Like Vic Cundiff, again, with like Dogman. We had him on the show a while back, and he said something I did not expect to hear from Vic Cundiff, right? Which is that he thinks that at least some, if not all, of the Dogman phenomena is paranormal. And something he pointed out that made a lot of sense is, why do we have a bunch of these people where it's like the Bigfoot, the Dogman tried to kill me. Do you really expect me to believe an 800-pound canine is going to try to get you? It's like, and we have these weird stories where they do seem to be doing something weird, like crawling in through a doggy door. It seems like, again, it's sort of the whole problem with the UFO phenomena. Even Nick Redfern, who you'll see, again, guy I know, he was on all the Ancient Alien shows. Even he'll say a lot of these encounters don't make sense. Like, if these aliens are traveling hundreds of thousands of light years to come here, they can turn you off like a light switch. They can control your memories. Why do we even know that they exist? There seem to be entire encounters that are manufactured so the encounter would happen. So that people could see them and give the report. Or for Dogman, he thinks that somehow our traumas are feeding them. Now, as, again, someone who does what I do, I find that very interesting, because I find that with people with sleep paralysis, people who have these demonic entities that they are clearly feeding off of the traumas that's happening, or at least the trauma is attracting them. So his point was, there's a lot of paranormal activity with a lot of these Dogman encounters. So I go back to, okay, well, we have a lot of overlapping material here. Again, I still think there's a humanoid, again, hominid. I think they're much smarter than people realize. Again, we just proved the billy ape exists, right? In Africa, the billy ape, it's nothing more than a slightly larger chimpanzee. No one got a good look at him until like 5 years ago. So you're telling me something that's even larger, has a larger brain, isn't going to be, even more adept at staying away from us? And again, that's assuming that they're actually staying away from us as often as we think. How often, again, with all the societal pressures, are people seeing them and saying, nope, it's a bear? One of my favorite scenes from the Batman animated series is there's this thug. They're like checking rooms. He opens the door and sees Batman and just looks at him and just closes the door. This other thug's like, everything clear? He goes, yep, entirely empty, and just walks away. It's like, how many people have that encounter with Bigfoot where it's like, yeah, it's a bear, I'm done. Right?
Yeah.
Bigfoot? It's like, and here's the thing: if they are like, we assume they're bipedal. The question I have is how often are they actually bipedal? I think they may be quadrupedal more often. They may knuckle walk way more than we realize. I mean, if you don't see them walking on two legs, you just see this hairy thing on all fours. It's a bear, right? Everyone says, well, how often are bears confused for Bigfoot? I say, how often are Bigfoot confused for bears?
Fair enough.
If you don't get a good enough look at the thing
Yeah.
and it's on all fours, you're going to assume it's a bear or maybe a cow. Maybe we have to have cows in zoos now because people are that disconnected from nature.
I got chased by a cow, and she will never let me live it down.
You should be no. Cows are terribly dangerous animals,
especially at night when they're black in the total darkness.
It was charging. It really was.
no, a cow will eat you and everyone you hold dear.
I said, take the small one, but she was already in the car.
Yeah.
I'm fast.
Okay, I know we've hit our hour, but I will say this: there is no such thing as herbivores. Only less successful predators. I have watched cows eat baby chickens. The first thing that shows up at a dead carcass are deer to eat it. I'm telling you, like there's nothing but there are no such thing as herbivores, and a cow is dumb enough to think they're probably not going to try and eat you because you're too big, but they will kill you if they don't like you. Deer will kill, dude. A male deer in rut season, they will find you and they will kill you.
They will kill you. Yeah, they will.
And any wild animal will try and kill you. Turtles, I love turtles, but even they will. If they get the chance, they'll take a bite out of you.
Why do I have a hard time picturing a little cute furry bunny rabbit trying to kill me?
You haven't lived long enough.
I saw that Pet movie. I saw the movie Pets.
I saw it too.
Yeah, it was a fluffy bunny that was
scary teeth.
Scary teeth.
Hey, a rabbit, given the opportunity, will kill you. Absolutely.
Jackrabbit.
Yep. Don't even get me started on jackrabbits.
Cows are very dangerous.
Yes, they are. Well, again, like one of the great Herculean. That was the Nemean line. Julius Caesar talked about hunting a particular bull, like slaying this particular bull was like this great feat of. Now again, it was technically an auroch, but I mean, our new cows are just as big and dangerous. We think of them as dumb because they are, and we think of them as harmless because we don't actually work with them more often. Plus, they're tamed. They know that we give them food.
It's just a scratch.
Burgers and steaks.
Exactly. We just think of them as moving.
Wound.
It's just a flesh wound. But again, that cow, if it decides that you are not someone who's going to feed it or take care of it, it's going to kill you. It's going to try and kill you at least. The problem is most cows are domesticated enough that they know that we mean food. And so they're going to leave us alone. But you should run from cattle, my friend. There's no shame in that.
Yeah, tell her that because she likes to give me a hard time.
No,
it was the first time when we went out randonauting. It was dark.
Mm-hmm.
There was no fence. It wasn't on the other side of a fence. It was just out in the open.
See, now that actually is now that gets dangerous because now you got a cow in an area where it doesn't understand. It doesn't know that it's probably not with the rest of its herd. Yeah. That's a dangerous situation to be in. And by the way, why would you give him crap for that when there's so much other reasons to give him crap?
True that.
Like there's no end to the list here.
She saves those for off camera, so but it was dark, it was pitch black, and we couldn't actually see it at first. All we could do was hear it.
Yeah.
And we heard something moving very fast, and you could tell by the sound it was very heavy.
Big. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when it shot up this hill, she was already by the car, and I'm just trying to figure out what the heck it is. And then we just heard it moving even faster, and I noped and jumped in the car.
All you saw was this giant black mass.
Yeah.
Really, it was more a guess that it was a cow than anything because it was so dark and it was just.
Well, so then again, cow probably being the more likely opportunity, but it could have been something else. You don't know. Maybe it was a giant.
The area we were in, it was most likely a cow, but we really don't know 100%.
But it got me nervous.
Yeah.
I survived to tell about it.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful.
Well, I know we are. Yeah, because otherwise we wouldn't have the show now, right?
Or it'd be a very different show.
I was almost your friend.
Yep.
But I know that we are past the hour. Do you have a couple extra minutes to answer any questions for our fans?
Anything for you.
Oh.
Okay, so anybody in the chat that's been following the show and hearing the conversation, now's your chance to go ahead and drop some questions for Jason. We will give you guys a few minutes to ask some questions and some ideas and viewpoints, and we'll go from there.
And someone had an attack rabbit.
We raised rabbits for a little bit when I was a kid. I'm telling you, they're not as nice as you think they are.
These are chickens.
Well, they're nice to me because I feed them.
Not that one.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, that one got eaten. So
Yeah.
She had one named Chicken, and it became dinner.
My wife is still talking about trying to raise chickens in her backyard and with some ducks, and I'm like, no.
I won't do ducks.
Apparently ducks are supposed to be really super awesome, but I'm like, we don't have time to maintain what we got. What do you mean chickens and ducks?
Yeah, I recognize that conversation. We don't have time to take care of them.
So we got a dog.
No. So we ended up getting 2 chickens. Then it became 4 chickens. Then it became 6 chickens. And then we ended up with a total of 10 chickens.
But now we're down to 8. So.
Then we got a dog.
Then you got a dog. There you go.
Because we have way more time for that.
But the dog likes the eggs. So it kind of, the chickens feed the dog. So we're good.
There you go. Exactly.
Do you have any questions?
All right.
Yet?
Yes, I'm trying to get over there because the mouse isn't working. Oh, where'd it go? I had it.
Okay, calm down, relax. The mouse is your friend. Just be friends with it.
It's not my friend today.
Okay, now you gotta just move it a little closer because see.
The heck. All right.
And there it is.
Oh wait, nope, that wasn't it.
No,
that wasn't it. Where'd it go? Did I not read it right? Oh, I guess I read it wrong. My bad.
Yeah, it looks like everyone's cool. Oh, hey, Joey.
Well, while we're waiting for any more questions that may come in, now you did mention a place that Tex has gone to called.
Yes.
What was it called again?
Brown Springs.
Brown Springs.
Yes.
Now, there's a story about Brown Springs. And a lot of experiences and things that have come up.
Oh, yeah.
That, right? And there's a group of people that's actually going to be heading back out there soon, isn't there?
Yes, there are. We'll keep the actual date limited, but yes, there's a group of people who will be out there.
And some of those people you may be looking at right now.
Perhaps.
Maybe.
Theoretically.
Possibly. Maybe.
Possibly.
Maybe I'll find out.
Hypothetically speaking.
So hypothetically, we may be able to be bringing you some footage of said location so you can see firsthand what this place is truly like.
Exactly. And it's it really is an interesting place. Like all the paranormal stuff aside, it's a really interesting location. The grave site is particularly interesting. There's apparently there was a large Jewish, or at least a Jewish community there for a while, because there's material in Hebrew up there on some of these stones. So, I mean, I'm not as well versed as to the history of Brown Springs, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The spring itself is seemingly unremarkable. Like when you find the spring, you're like, that's it. You kind of expect it to be more. But like it's an interesting place. It's right there off of the river, off of the Red River. It's a really interesting location, and again, that's one of the highest points, right? On the Oklahoma side. So I would not be terribly surprised if we could, do some real digging around there. I wouldn't be surprised to find that it was actually a mound, that it's not actually a hill, that it was a burial mound. I would not be surprised by that in the least because of its location. But the problem is, it's buried. We got cemeteries on it, and it's overgrown, so it's not going to happen. So,
lots of ghost reports and Bigfoot reports and tiger reports from
possible
tiger sightings.
That is currently my favorite story, and of course Tex hates it, but I'm like, dude, I think it was a tiger. I think it was a Bigfoot. Anyway, that's a whole other kettle of fish for his channel. Where's the hottest spot for Bigfoot? So see, that's the problem, right? At this point, we cannot properly delineate between what is the hominid Bigfoot versus the supernatural Bigfoot. Now, what I will say is Pacific Northwest, right? That's where Patterson Gimlin was. That seems to be a friend of mine. I just forgot her name. That's terrible when you forget your own friends' names. I'd forget my own name if I didn't sew it on my underwear. Shelly Covington, Montana. Thank you. Shelly Covington, Montana is out there. She gets stuff all the time, particularly audio. I will say again, Red River, the Sabine River, heck, the Trinity River around Texas. We still get a lot of sightings. East Texas is flush with stories about Bigfoot. Again, the Texarkana area, the Sulphur Springs area, the Falk area, that is, ripe with Bigfoot stories. So what you're really looking for Bigfoot, we have the Ohio grassman, we got Florida that's popular, Louisiana, but the problem with Louisiana is deciding between Bigfoot or actual Cajuns. It's hard to tell them apart. Is that what you're looking for is a creek or river, right? That's what you're looking for, and you're looking for areas where there's going to be sufficient wildlife to support a large primate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, they seem to, again, I have 5 reports out of an area that has 2 movie theaters and all kinds of restaurants. DBU is up the road. I was all over that area as a teenager. My parents and I went out to Lake Joe Pool to fish and do all kinds of things all the time. It is a busy area, and I got 5 accounts of them being seen and heard in that area because they're using the creeks to navigate through. So they'll come as close to a city as they freaking want to. So they're not. You don't necessarily need to go out in the middle of nowhere. They will come in, and honestly, my theory is that we need to be putting up cameras around areas that have like gas stations that have food that gets thrown away, that are sort of on the edges of towns and are next to creeks and rivers, because I think that's where we're going to find them. We know that they will dumpster dive. We just got to get better cameras out there trained on those dumpsters. And the thing is, let's assume that there's nothing supernatural about them in general, and that they're not, or they don't have some sort of electro sense where they're like, hey, that's a camera. You put something, if they're just looking, it's like, that's clearly man-made and I don't want anything to do with it in my, because they're in nature. You put a camera on the back of a building next to an electrical junction, they're not going to think anything of it, because
makes a lot of sense.
It's a person, it's a people thing where people are. Why would they care? Right. They don't know that's actually a camera. They just know that it's a thing that is man-made, but it's with all the other man-made things. They won't care about it. The problem is we take all these man-made things, we stick them on trees, and we're like, why can't we find them? Because they see that you got a man-made thing on a tree. By the way, I do, again, vague. Problem is, this particular gentleman is, he has a career in the, official, like, fishing and hunting and arenas, right, sort of thing. So his entire career is in the wild. He has, again, this comes to me by someone who's actually seen the photo and is a good friend of mine, that they have been captured on these cameras. The problem is sometimes, a good clear image. The problem is a lot of the people who are catching these, like this particular gentleman, they don't want their careers destroyed releasing it.
Yeah.
So the problem is, I do think that I think that the reason we don't catch them on many game cams is because the game cam is just sitting out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Right? It's not because necessarily they have some supernatural or human ability. It's just they're like, I don't know what that is. I'm going to stay away from it. Whereas you put it on, say, the back of a building, they're just going to be like, okay, the building still looks weird. People think I'm going to get the food. Right? So you're looking, again, Pacific Northwest, East Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, that whole area, again, ripe with them. Same thing with Florida. But like I said, these are very, 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 in my opinion, only. They have a very small population. Stupidly small. I would argue less than 5,000 is for continental U.S. only. So That's just my opinion though. But I mean, it seems to make the most sense of anything.
Wow.
It does make sense.
Which leaves all the
Seems
rest
hard.
of the sightings to be supernatural. So take that for what you want.
Okay, here we go. Joy's asking that place is meant to be crazy. If Jason could relay, I can't read. Could Jason relay Texas story if okay? Good
Yeah, that's
grief, that
fine.
was hard.
So, okay, it's not just Texas Story. Gary was there, Senior was there, Junior was there, as well as some other people. So, but again, so Tex has actually seen 2 Bigfoot in that location, broad daylight.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we'll assume that they were Bigfoot, but I mean, broad daylight, they were there. However, we have multiple occasions where he's there, he's tending the fire, and this creature just sort of appears, glowing eyes, right? And there's no noise associated with it. But then the crazy story, again, you can see it on Texas Front Porch. The quick version is they were getting him and the girls from the What the Paranormal channel were getting all kinds of crazy stuff on their spirit box. And then Gary Sr. and Jr. were watching 3 shadow figures with glowing eyes. They're only 4.5 feet tall. That when Junior hit them with one of those real bright tack lights, they vanished entirely. We turned the light off, they reappeared. All while Senior was hearing what appeared to be maybe a giant cat stalking them at the same time, which they even saw what may have been a giant cat leap once they were leaving. You moved across the road. We don't know that it was a giant cat. It could have been something else entirely. But at the end of the day, what we came to the conclusion was we have multiple phenomena happening at the same time to the same people, and each one seemed to be designed to hit at their fear, right? The spirit box was talking about, was clearly talking about what the paranormal girl's husband
Amy.
and father, and I was just trying to be, I didn't want to bring in new names, but they were talking. So Amy and Laney, and they were talking about it was clearly talking about Cody, who was alone with the trucks. So that starts freaking everybody out. We have these 3 creatures that Junior and Senior were watching while, Senior's being is hearing this what may have been a large cat, which is one of the few things that he was actually worried about because large cats will go after people. And for Junior, he thought he called them Alexas, which are sort of the Mexican little people, right? That's the only thing that scares him. And I'm like, myself and Ranger X, that's our name for the other friend who was there. It's like, guys, these are all going to your fear spots, right? It seems like everything was designed to freak you out. That doesn't seem like a coincidence to me, right? So it's like Texas channel. We had everyone that could come on. We had Amy Laney, we had Gary Senior and Junior on there. Y'all can go find that episode on Texas Front Porch. It was a crazy evening.
There may be another one of those episodes coming out here.
Yeah, we'll have to stay
in
tuned.
a few weeks.
Yep.
Definitely a place that a lot of enthusiasts may want to visit, but maybe a place where a lot of them shouldn't visit because.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will definitely say that it's. So here's the thing: the craziest things that we find out there, for me, isn't necessarily the supernatural stuff. It's the clothing and the other artifacts that just seem to be dropped out. I mean, randomly. Like again, it's like I've seen people shooting and leaving dogs on the side of a road. Like that stuff's happened. I've seen that. That doesn't freak me out. Finding the toilet didn't bother me per se. It's the shoe. It's the one shoe. It's the panties. It's like all these clothes. But it's like one item. You're like, what the heck happened out here? Why is there a woman's like nightie hanging in that tree over there? Right? I mean, it's like I get some of it, but then some of the other stuff you're just like, well, who only has one shoe?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
We found one shoe, didn't we?
Today.
Yep.
Yeah. Like I've never understood. Like, what did you do with your other shoe? Did you lose a shoe and just didn't realize it?
Did you lose the foot?
Did you lose well, it's like when I worked at FedEx office, I worked third shift. I was always surprised by people leaving their keys and not coming back for them. I'm like, how did you get home?
Right.
My favorite one are the canes and walkers. I'm like, how did you leave? Like, if you need a walker to come in, did you get miraculously healed while you were making photocopies? Is there some sort of charismatic preacher out there in the middle, out there making copies and just be like, you healed?
Right.
Can you make a photocopy of this? Okay. I mean, I don't know, but like I said, those are the things that bother me most because you don't know what the story is behind that. Like maybe it's just a bunch of teenagers out there doing things that teenagers do, or maybe it's something else. Again, one of the times we were out there, it was actually the only time I was ever scared in the field was that night. Like I genuinely had the sensation that I cannot tell you, it wasn't like anything had happened. I know what like normal fear is. This was, I knew with ontological certitude I was not safe. And I needed to get the hell out of there. And that's when Texan showed up only to tell me that there was a coven of witches out there sacrificing chickens.
Oh,
and the police were looking for them.
Lovely.
Yeah, and I think I actually followed them in when I had gotten there that day. So it was just, I was like, okay, so it is a weird place. So even on a good day, it's a weird place.
Scout could find the chicken eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Or the chicken pieces, yes. What was left of the chicken.
Before we go, there is one comment up here I did want to read out from Sky Forest. It says, Gary, I have lived in the woods all my life. The past 2 years has opened my eyes to things I never thought of before. So much weird stuff I've never talked about. I want the city now. Big baby.
And I would have clicked it up, but my mouse just died. So
it died.
I understand.
Yeah, it is not functioning. Oh, what the crap?
How
did you do that? I have been squiggling that thing all over the place. It doesn't like me. Sorry.
Give me the mouse.
Yeah,
back.
take it back. It don't like me no more.
So Sky Forest,
Sky.
you don't need to move into the city. Right now, the cities are the worst place to be. Move into the suburbs. Like, just move in where there's like more people. I will say this. So this goes back to the whole thing, right? There is paranormal phenomena that exists, and it is in the woods. It was the Leshy to the Indo-Russians. It's the Fae to the Europeans. It's Pan. It's the Satyrs. It's the Fauns to the Greeks and Romans. It's the Shahadim to the Hebrew. It was the Sasquatch to the Indians of the Pacific Northwest, right? There have always been demons, jinn, fae, fairies, elves, and they are in the wild. They are they're out there. Again, like I said, not everything is Bigfoot. When you have these paranormal, these paranormal entities are real. They have always been real. The problem is our society has rejected the fact, the long-held understanding these things are real. Because we've rejected them, we kind of dropped a lot of the protections that people used to have. People used to do things to protect themselves. We don't do that anymore. So in the veil is, I'm telling y'all, I think we're close. We're very, very close. One of my books is on the 2017 alignment. It doesn't end until 2027. I was the only one to say that is Revelation 12. And it's nothing to do with the rapture. But that veil is thinning, folks. Like Revelation 12 is happening right now. We're in the middle of it. In fact, we've kind of passed it. It's like there's a big "you are here" point. The veil is thinning. We are seeing weirder and weirder stuff. We are seeing things that haven't been recorded for 1,000 years. Succubi, incubi. They are showing up way more often than they used to. It used to be hard to find this phenomena. It is everywhere now. That is not a coincidence. If it's happening on your property, please understand it is. You're not crazy. Crazy people, believe me, I've been in Dallas long enough to know, crazy people piss on themselves while their friends are being gored by cows. But no, they talk to themselves on street corners, right? To people who aren't there.
Right.
There's 100 things crazy people do. these things are real. You are not crazy. You are encountering them. Stick structures are not all, are I'm convinced are probably not Bigfoot. Some of them may be, but I'm starting to think that some of these stick structures are not Bigfoot at all. They may be something else entirely. And I'll also, and I can end on this statement because I can say this with absolute facts. I've seen the materials and I've talked to people high enough in Dallas to say this. And I think it doesn't apply to just Dallas. I think it's everywhere. There was this big push. I'm a child of the 80s. So I remember this big push for occultists, right? And everything was being blamed on cults.
Mm-hmm.
I am here to tell you there are real occultists out there. I'm not talking about these Sephora, these moms with Tupperware parties that are, that used to do Tupperware parties are now doing, white witch ceremonies in the middle of some field somewhere because they bought something at Sephora, right? I am talking about the real occultists, the people who do hard Enochian magics. I'm talking about the people who absolutely do sacrifice humans. I am talking about people who are into the truly hardcore stuff. They are around. They are absolutely real, and they are active in far more cities than you realize. I would argue it is entirely possible that every major U.S. city has a large, very powerful coven of these occultists. I know for a fact Dallas has them. I've seen them. Guys, these things are real, and they are. And I think a lot of in their activity, the lack of spiritual understanding in the rest of us has led to this veil thinning as we come closer to the end. These things are going to get worse. So trust me. You tell me you're seeing this activity on your property, I fully believe it. But move to the suburbs. The cities are foreboding. They're just gonna let the cities burn at this point. Move to the suburbs.
There's a lot of more dangers in the city, in my opinion, because they're people with guns, knives, and desperate, and addicted. And the list can go on and on. Skyforest, if you actually want to email us at TIPA official at gmail.com.
Oh, look, there it is scrolling across the bottom.
How beautiful is that? We would like to talk to you a little bit more off air if you'd like, or just through email or something else. But you have me really curious about your property and some of your experiences. Mm-hmm. Again, if you want to stay off air, if you want to keep this just quiet, just reach out to us through the email. And I kind of like to talk to you a little bit more about that because you have piqued my curiosity. If you're okay with that. If not, that's totally okay as well. Just to put that out.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, reach out to them. These are wonderful people. Well, I mean, at least Mary Ann's wonderful. I don't know about the other guy.
Yeah, you talk to her because she's the smart one. I'm just the guy who knows how to work the camera and run from the cows.
Yeah. So if you got cows on your property, he is ready to run from them, my friend.
Unless they're already on a burger patty. Then I'll eat them all day long.
That's his favorite kind.
Yep.
Yeah. People scare me, says Jackie Wheeler. So
word.
And they should.
Mm-hmm.
Word.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry,
No, we are so happy that you came on with us, and I'm gonna invite you already back. We'll pick a date afterwards, but
love to.
I want to do this again because I know that this is just an inkling of what we could get into because this has been phenomenal. And I love the chat. I love the thoughts that have been coming through. I love the questions that people have been having. It's just been really thought provoking. And I love the analogies you've given. The fact that people kind of, like you said, I envisioned it like my kid's Lego box where it's not Legos. They just dump everything in there to get rid of it.
Yep.
And it's Legos. So here you go. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I keep thinking every time you say they just shove it in a box and mix it all up, they just shake it and here you go. But I'm
stealing that, by the way, the Lego box now, because you're right. My kids did. It's like you got Legos, you got those stupid Duplo boxes, then you got like those wooden Lincoln logs. You're like, none of this works together.
No, but they throw it in the same box.
Yes. Because you're right. In our minds, it's all Legos anyway, but it's not.
They're all building stuff,
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not how it works.
I'm officially stealing that from you. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. I win. Jason, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Let's do this again soon.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
And
Absolutely.
anybody who wants to look into Jason even more, again, the link is down below. Go
Mhm.
ahead and click on that. Go over there,
Yep.
show him love, support, and everything
Yes.
else. And buy that book. And like you heard earlier, if you want a signed copy of it, there is a way for you to get a signed copy of that
Yes.
book. So keep that in mind.
Heck, I'll
We're
sign
gonna
things
play.
that aren't mine. Just like, can you sign this? Sure. I'll
We'll-
sign the
we'll-
comic book. I don't care.
We'll send you a picture of Marianne and you can sign it. And I bet you it'll hang on somebody's wall.
It probably will.
Ours. All right. We love you guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.
Bye, guys.